4 centuries ago, a privately owned English vessel named the White Lion sailed these waters carrying human cargo to trade for food and supplies.
The ship came up the Chesapeake Bay, and it landed here at Point Comfort in the latter part of August of 1619. And on that ship were 20 and odd Africans.
Founder of Project 1619, Calvin Pearson, walks the grounds of today's Fort Monroe in Hampton, Virginia. On this strip of land called Port Comfort then, the first enslaved Africans landed in colonial Virginia. It marked the beginning of an odyssey of millions of Africans being brought to America as slaves for more than 200 years.
The first Africans who were brought here were destined for a life of servitude. They had to work the plantations from sunup to sunset, the tobacco fields, the corn fields. They had to work these fields with no hope of ever being free.
It makes me feel goosebumps and a sad nostalgia.
Historian Bill Wiggins says the first captured Africans had no legal status until the Virginia colony formally legalized lifelong slavery in 1661.
I just can imagine the sailing into the bay of these chained individuals in a strange land, not knowing anything about where they were, being taken off of the vessel and told, you're going to work here, you're going to live here.
Evidence from scarce records indicates more than 24 Africans were aboard the White Lion. Weeks earlier, the Africans were forcibly taken from a Portuguese slave ship heading to Mexico.
These were free people who had been kidnapped as free people and sold into slavery.
2 enslaved Africans named Anthony and Isabella, likely from Angola and baptized Catholic, were taken off the White Lion when it reached the shores of Port Comfort.
These are the sacred land of our ancestors, and when I walk this land, I think about Anthony and Isabella. I think about what were they thinking about getting off a ship in a strange land. This is ground zero. This is the beginning of the African imprint on America.
The first Africans were sold or traded to wealthy white plantation owners in Hampton and the Jamestown settlement, which became the Virginia colony. A few days after the White Lion landed in Virginia, another ship, the Treasurer, arrived carrying a few slaves, including one named Angela.
Angela, interestingly, is the only African whose name was actually written in the records in 1620 that survived. Now, there may have been other names mentioned, but those records did not survive.
Archaeologists say Angela spent part of her life in Jamestown settlement, now a national park where archaeologists are trying to unearth clues about her life.
With Angela, we can tell the much broader story of slavery and the beginnings of slavery in our country and racism, which really went hand in hand with slavery, and at the same time give Angela, through our imagination, some sense of identity, some sense of dignity.
And it was Angela and so many others that made the colonists prosperous.
They did most of the work, and a number of them obviously died in the process, but we owe a debt to those Africans because they were the foundation of the economic development of what became the United States of America.
Slavery began in Virginia, and it was at this site where the first actions to end the system took place. During the Civil War, 3 runaway slaves working for the Confederate Army fled to Fort Monroe, seeking sanctuary from the Union troops there. Union Army Major General Benjamin Butler declared the slaves as contraband or seized goods. That decision eventually provided protection to thousands who sought freedom at Fort Monroe and laid the groundwork for an even broader measure.
They forced the federal government and Lincoln to issue the Emancipation Proclamation, which subsequently led, of course, to the 13th Amendment, ending enslavement, and paved the way for the 14th Amendment, which provided citizenship in 1868.
Fort Monroe now is a national monument, majestic grounds that future generations can explore to learn more about the early history of an emerging nation. Chris Simkins, VOA News, Hampton, Virginia.